You are listening to the default audio track, which includes instructional narrative. To turn off this audio track and listen to just music, simply press the audio button on your DVD remote. To turn off the music, press the audio button once again to hear just the sounds of the ride. Welcome everybody to the Tour de Steamboat. This is the fifth and final stage as we're heading back to the town of Steamboat. It's about a 30-mile ride, an hour and 45 minutes with a rest stop at about an hour into this ride. So if you want to pause and get off, get a drink or something at the rest stop, that's a good place to do it. I'm here with a friend and guest today. His name is Mike Meese. He's a beginning cyclist, lives here in Denver, Colorado. He's been riding for about 2 years, I guess. Right, Mike? Yes, no?
Yeah, just about it. Actually, going on 2 years, just starting my second year of riding.
And we're just we'll talk about some training techniques and tips again. And what I'd like Mike to do is basically ask some questions if he's got any about planning for a long distance century ride, and or whatever else that comes to mind. Just to have a little bit of fun. This is a pretty long video, so might be nice to kind of break up the monotony of constantly talking about how to climb your bike and talk a little bit about cycling or life, work. Real quickly, I'd like to introduce the display again. For those of you who have been watching this is all old news, but there's two graphs on the bottom. And the top graph is our hill profile. You can see that it's mostly downhill for the next 30 miles. And then there's a little climb at about an hour into the ride. The lower graph is our effort level profile. And the red zones are at about 86% of max as our maximum heart rate for the segment. We'll be averaging in the low 80s. So a nice anaerobic workout with lots of intervals. You can see how it looks a little jagged like a knife blade. And this is because we actually find some help along this ride, and we get a guy, we start taking turns pulling, and each one of those spikes is us up front. And each dip is us drafting in the back, so kind of interesting. So right now we're spinning at a cadence of about 80 RPM, and our heart rate is in the low 70s. So follow the gear ratio on the right there. It's pretty accurate. The cadence is all over the place, so that might be difficult to stick with the cadence, or that cadence value isn't real good on this one just because of all the changes in coasting and pedaling coasting and pedaling, with especially with having somebody up front. So anyway, just to give you a heads up on that. So Mike, what do you do out here in Colorado?
Well, I work for Hewlett Packard out at the Miller Coors site supporting a computer system called SAP. Been doing that now for about 13 years.
Cool. And I guess, how'd you get into cycling? How'd you get into the sport?
Well, actually, I started really mountain biking, because I originally never thought a road bike would be able to hold me, because I'm not a small guy.
Mike's a big guy.
Which I'm hoping road bike will help make me a little bit smaller. Because I started off mountain biking and I really enjoy it, and I still do it now and then, but crashing down the mountain started to hurt more, so I figured if I can do road biking, a little bit longer rides, hopefully less crashing, less pain. For me, cycling is really one of the only options I have for exercising, because, well, I've had 5 knee surgeries on my left leg from wrestling and football in high school, and running isn't an option, so cycling is just an enjoyable way for me to get some exercise.
That's awesome. Yeah, Mike, and you did, I think you did your first long distance ride at the Elephant Rock, what, last year?
Yeah, I did the metric century. I was tempted to do the full century, but it was my first ride, and I was a little intimidated, actually.
It is a little spooky.
So I decided I'd do the metric, because I felt that I could do that easily, because I had, been riding, close to that distance just on a regular basis around town. So it was a lot of fun. I can see what they talk about the wind at the Elephant Rock.
Did you, when you were finished, did you feel like you might have been able to do the full century?
Actually, yeah. When I got done, I got done a lot faster than I thought I was. I actually forget my time now, but I did it relatively quick. And when I felt like I could have probably done the century, so that's my goal this year. Is I want to do not only E-Rock full century, I want to do some other rides and just do a lot more organized riding this summer.
Yeah, there's one in Iowa you wanted to do.
Yeah, the Ragbri right across Iowa. That's one it's sort of my goal this year, if I can get a couple other people to do it with me. That's a 6-day ride, Sunday to Saturday. Ride averages about 70 miles a day. But from what I understand, Iowa's not flat, because that's where my grandparents are from, so there's a lot of rollers. But it's supposed to be a real fun time, a way to get into distance riding. And they say you don't have to be a real serious cyclist. So, but they also say you need to be able to, you should have at least 1,000 miles on your bike before you get to the Elephant Rock. I mean, to the Ragbri.
Right. Well, Denver's a good place to train for that. The similar topography, and put in a lot of base mile training. Base miles are basically those miles that, well, try to back up here. If you're training for an event like the one in Iowa, and you know the landscape, and you know the distance, then it's a good idea, or for training for base miles, is basically doing the training that best emulates the ride that you're training for. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So probably in preparing for that ride, be a good idea to do at least, I'd say 5 days straight at 30 to 50 miles per day.
Okay.
And then also ride the same type of topography, you know, here in the Front Range. Denver would probably be pretty appropriate.
Yeah, just some of the rides that I've gone on around. I have a really nice loop that goes from my house up in Arvada up to Erie, and then it loops around back into Boulder and then back, and that's about depending on which way I turn, I can make it into about a 40-mile loop.
Right.
And I like to ride that.
You can see here on the video, oh, here's our friend, actually. We're cruising along pretty good, 25 miles an hour. I slowed down a little bit when I saw him behind me. I was like, oh, thank God. So I get to take a break, let this guy pull a little bit.
Now, pulling, you talked about that, and you've tried to tell me that before. It can be intimidating.
You mean being up front?
Oh no, being behind.
Oh, that's harder.
Because especially for somebody new like me that may not have complete bike control yet.
Okay.
I mean, what are your suggestions on like what we're doing right now?
Well,
getting up on this guy's wheel, and is there any etiquette?
Yes. Great question, Mike. Thank you. Start out with what you said. Your comfort on the bike. You should only follow somebody as close as you feel comfortable following. The pros will ride about 6 inches off the back wheel. In other words, their front wheel is 6 inches behind the guy in front of the back wheel. And there's two components that you're looking at. One is your own ability, and second is the ability of the rider in front of you to ride a straight line and to maintain even pace. This guy we don't know, so you have no clue what he's capable of, if he's squirrely or if he's a good, solid, consistent rider. So we start out with a 2 to 3 foot gap. You know, I've seen guys, I've been drafting, come to a hill, come out of the saddle, and they slow down 5 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden, you know, I'm like touching wheels with them. Or they might be squirrely, avoiding potholes and not looking forward enough to point those potholes out, and they'll just make an abrupt move left or right to avoid the road obstruction, leaving you either in the hole yourself or getting hit by the bike. So, you know, always, if you don't know the person in front of you, be conservative and play it safe, and give a little distance. And then, of course, you know, if you're pulling and you're wobbly or wiggly or whatever, you're up front. You know, it's really up to the guy behind you to make a determination as to whether or not you're safe to draft, or at what distance. Actually, on stage 2 of this ride, there is a guy pulling, and he didn't point anything out. He didn't point out any debris, and he just kept moving his bike around it. And there was about, you know, 6 people behind him, and nothing got pointed out. And as a result, I was like hitting all that stuff he was trying to avoid. And I got sick of it, and I just passed him up. So, you know,
that's where, you know, for me, I'd letting go of a handlebar to point something out. I mean, the more I'm on the bike, the more comfortable I'm getting. But that'd be something I need to work on.
Well, you know, that comes with experience and time. Control of your bike handling. And it just, you know, also being comfortable on your bike and being fit to your bike will help your handling a lot. So if you're uncomfortable, you know, the chances are you're you're going to be a little more squirrely. So just being relaxed and comfortable is a real important part. But yeah, you know, if you're in a group and you've been riding with them for a while and you know who to trust and who not to trust, then you know, you can take some more risks and follow them up a little bit closer and save some energy.
Okay, I'll have to try that. Because for the E-Rock, I pretty much rode by myself. I mean, I get into groups, but
right,
there wasn't really any quote-unquote drafting. I think a couple people drafted off me because
you're a big guy.
I'm a pretty big windbreak.
Yeah, I drafted off you.
So I didn't really draft off anybody. I did get in one group, but I just wasn't sure what the etiquette was. So I just rode.
Take a notice here, everybody, that each time we get behind this guy, let's take off 2 clicks of resistance and make it easier for ourselves. And then now that we're passing him, let's add 2 clicks. Or if you're on a spin bike, about a half turn each time. If you're in front, add about a half turn to a turn of resistance. Get your heart rate up. And then you see this guy come passing us up. We're going to take off a little resistance and relax our spin. So noticing the gear guide, actually shift down 1 here. Not as much because now we're hitting a hill and now we're back up. And then we're going to actually add another click and get that resistance up. And our heart rate's going to start shooting up here as we're coming up over this little hill. Keeping the cadence up around 80, 85. Heart rate should be getting into the mid 80s.
No.
Yeah.
For a new rider, you're talking about gearing and stuff here. What kind of advice do you have for somebody like me who was new to this? And right now, I ride whatever feels comfortable, which may not be the correct gear. Sometimes I feel I'm going out and I'm in too strong of a gear and I burn my legs out. Other times I feel like I'm going too easy and spinning without making up any distance. And I know that's a question my wife always asks me. And I can't answer her that question.
Well, you know, spinning is a big component to cycling. Take off a little resistance here. And if you want to preserve your knees and you want to preserve your strength, you'll use a higher or a lower gear with less resistance and try and keep your cadence at around 80 to 100 RPM for the bulk of any ride. The only time you should drop down less than 80 is if the hill is just too steep for your gearing and your legs, and you're trying to control your heart rate, for example. You don't want to let it get too high. So you shift into your lowest chain ring or whatever, and then grind up the hill. Watch your efforts and make sure you don't go too far into the red, and whatever cadence you're hammering out at the time is pretty much what you're going to be limited to, just because as the hill gets steeper, sometimes you just can't control how fast your legs are going. That's my advice, keeping the cadence higher, better for your knees, and also you won't burn up your leg strength so quickly.
Yeah, because I find that on long rides, especially the first couple I did, I was afraid to burn the legs, and I kept it too low.
Your cadence was too low?
And then I went to the other extreme on the next ride, and it's taken a while to get to where I feel comfortable, you know, riding 50 miles.
Right. Well, you know, there's a nobody's the same. We're at a 10 or a 8 out of 10 on resistance here. So we're feeling this little hill, still keeping the cadence up, but we're watching our heart rate climb as we're trying to keep our speed up over this little hill. Drop it down one. Some people are just born mashers, where they'll be using lower cadences, and I see that a lot, especially on time trials. People use these. Some people use a really big gear, and they're fast. So, you know, some people like Lance like to spin it up around 115 RPM on a time trial. And so there's a you know, a preference factor too. Where's your body performing best at? Where do you feel most comfortable? So I can't say that for everybody. Everybody should be doing the same cadences, but as a rule of thumb, a higher cadence is better in the long run, especially for long distance rides, where you need to save your leg strength for the entire ride. We're behind, so we can take off some resistance and then put it right back on again.
And then on your long rides, you need energy. I mean, you can't eat a huge breakfast and go out and expect it to last for the whole ride. So what do you do on your ride? Like for me on the Elephant Rock, I stopped at every rest area, but that adds time to your ride.
Now it's important to note that a century ride is not a competitive event. And so use the rest stops and take a break and refuel. I use every one. I think recovery, you know, is as important as the actual workout. So you need to let your muscles recover and then also get some food. As far as preparation before the ride, as far as nutrition goes, the day before the event, I don't do anything real special with my diet. But I do plan it. In other words, what I need to do is make sure that I'm eating a meal that I'm comfortable with and eating in quantities that I'm comfortable with. So we don't overeat before a race or a century, and we don't undereat, and we don't change our diet. I mean, if we're used to eating, you know, our regular foods or whatever, and then the day before the race comes and all of a sudden we pack in a pound of spaghetti or more, you know, those carbohydrates, for a lot of us, if that's not a regular part of our eating diet, is very difficult to digest and will actually hinder you on the actual event. And then the other thing is that it might hinder you on your sleep as well. I mean, if our bellies are full and we get gas, you know, or heartburn, you know, it's really hard to sleep if we're not used to or acclimated to the diet. Professionals, you know, they do this so frequently, and they have a certain dietary need, and part of that need is complex carbohydrates. They eat this on a regular basis. I mean, these guys are training, you know, 50, 100 miles a day, and at the end of each day, they have a very consistent meal, you know, with high carbs, spaghetti or whatever. But you and me, I mean, if we're, riding, 4 days a week, 3 days a week, 30 miles a day, we don't have the same nutritional requirements, and we have a probably different meal to, sustain our activity. And so what we do is make sure we eat the same diet before a race that we would normally eat, or before the event. No more, no less.
And then during the event?
Well, I'd always eat a good breakfast before the ride. Again, nothing that's too heavy. You don't want to feel full. You want to feel fulfilled.
Okay.
And then during the ride, sometimes you're at the mercy of the ride promoter and what they set up for you at the stations. And a lot of stations I found have mostly sweets. Oranges, bananas. I mean, it's all healthy, good stuff, but it's all sweet. And sometimes you might find a few pretzels. And then some of them might have water or a power drink. And what I'm wary of is basically just taking on too much complex carbos through the ride, eating all the cookies and fruits and stuff like that. One thing, the fruits, if it's not something you eat a ton of, high fiber can be at the end of the ride, it might be a little uncomfortable. So just eat as much fruit as probably as what you would normally eat, and then maybe a cookie or two at a stop, but don't fill up on the foods that they give you there. And what I do is I pack my own food, my own nutrition. And what I like to pack is I like to keep 1 bottle of water and 1 bottle of a power drink, something that'll replace the electrolytes. So making sure it's high electrolyte or sodium, because when we're sweating, we're losing all of our electrolytes, and if we're just replacing salt water with water, then we have an imbalance. And so what happens is our cells aren't able to actually absorb the water that we drink when there's no sodium. And when this happens, this is when we start cramping, or we just get very fatigued or dehydrated, even though we're drinking a ton of water. So we need to make sure that we're replacing electrolytes. That's key. So a power drink, and I also pack a set of these goo or gel blasts. Goo makes them, Power Bar makes them. It's basically like a gumdrop that you can just throw in the back jersey and take a couple every 30 minutes.
Okay.
And that'll help keep the electrolytes balanced. Yeah, because when you run out of sodium, it doesn't matter how many cookies or bananas you eat, that's not going to put it back. So you gotta be real careful. And then if you're trying to fill up, if you're trying to make up that deficiency with cookies, what we wind up doing is eating too many complex carbs, and then that just sits in our gut. And because we're dehydrated, we can't digest it. So that gets real uncomfortable real fast too. Nice easy draft here. Easy gear. Letting our heart rate come down to the mid 70s.
Now you say you use 2 water bottles. What's your take on
more?
The platypus or the water bag? 'Cause I know
Oh, the the backpack?
Yeah.
Yeah, those aren't bad. I mean, I don't like carrying them, but I mean they're good because it makes it easy to stay hydrated. As long as you have something else to help replace the sodium. You know, if you drink too much water while you're sweating, then that can actually be a disadvantage.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I just don't like the taste of the water out of those things, so I usually just carry bottles. And every 25 miles, where they throw on a rest stop, I fill up with water. And most Sentries have some sort of Powerade, Gatorade, or something that you can put in your bottle. Here we are behind him again, taking off resistance.
Because I switch to a water bag plus my water bottles because I don't know if it's my conditioning or just my size. I
use a lot.
I sweat a lot, and then I cramp. And I found if I had more water, I didn't cramp as bad.
Yeah. Well, if you're hydrated, Mike, you won't cramp. Okay. The thing is staying hydrated on a ride is critical. Now, if the ride is to an extent where you've basically depleted your body of sodium, and that can take a long time to do. I mean, if your breakfast was a McDonald's sausage McMuffin or something, I mean, those things are loaded with salt. That'll take a while to perspire out. And so, I mean, you may be actually helping your system become more balanced as you're sweating that out and drinking lots of water. But eventually, you'll sweat all your sodium out, and then it doesn't matter how much water you drink, you're going to cramp up. So when your body is no longer at equilibrium sodium water content, then you'll start cramping. As a matter of fact, this ride, I did something wrong, and I'm not sure what it was, but I was cramping like crazy. Colorado is a really dry state, so we lose water very quickly. And if it starts getting warm, it goes even faster. And this ride was actually pretty hot. It was about 90 degrees at 9,500 feet. And so I lost a lot of fluids, even though I was taking it on, eating my goos, and I still cramped up. Taking a break here behind our draft, and our heart rate settle back in. So I was trying to eat salt. I went through all my goo. I think that was my biggest problem, because I didn't pack enough. But I was trying to eat these little fish crackers that they had at the stops to replace the salt, but I could barely chew them up because my mouth was so dry. So I had a really tough time maintaining a balance on this ride.
How to use the dash. The dashboard is composed of a number of different tools that provide data which allow you to emulate the physical demands of the ride. The first and most important tool on the dash is the effort meter. The effort meter provides a graphical representation of how hard you should be working during a specific part of the ride. In this video, we're ascending a small climb while trying to keep a good pace for other riders behind us. Watch how the effort increases as we continue to ascend. The effort meter is color-coded to help you quickly know what zone you should be training in, be it the weight loss zone, aerobic zone, anaerobic zone, or red zone. Each zone is based on a percentage of your maximum effort. Blue, which is below 70%, is your weight loss zone. Green, between 70 to 79% of max, is your aerobic zone. Yellow, between 80 to 89% of max, is your anaerobic zone, and red, from 90 to 100% of max, is your red zone. Be aware that the difficulty of each video is greatly dependent on the time spent in each zone. At the top of the effort meter is your heart rate goal displayed as a percentage of your max. Percent of max is calculated as your actual heart rate divided by your max. This value can be used to challenge yourself further by teaching your body how to precisely regulate efforts. Some heart rate monitors allow you to input your max heart rate and then automatically calculate your percentage of max. The gear ratio and resistance indicator provides you with two ways to determine what gear or what resistance you should be working at. The gear ratio is the best way to make changes in resistance if you're on your bike and trainer. With shifters, you can quickly make changes to gearing to simulate changes in pedaling effort. This animation provides an idea of how the gear ratio works. Notice how above the blue line, the numbers are ascending from 1 to 10. This corresponds to the gear that's in your rear cassette. Below the blue line are the two rings in the front, 42 being the small ring, 52 being the large. The resistance value is a tool to be used if you're on a spin bike. Most spinners are comfortable with a 1 to 10 scale used in classes. Basically, a 1 is a soft pedaling, easy spin resistance, whereas a 10 is a slow, leg-churning, difficult grind where you have to force the crank arms to turn. The cadence value allows you to identify what your pedaling cadence should be. While the cadence, resistance, and heart rate indicators attempt to synchronize, often it's difficult to match everything at the same time. Start out using either cadence or resistance while matching the effort goals. Much like the effort tool, the power tool provides a graphical representation of how much power the cyclist is producing during a given time. The power tool is a nice alternative or backup to the resistance and gear ratio tools. The power tool is a much more accurate way to identify sudden changes in power. At the top of this tool is a number that reflects a percentage of maximum power. What is maximum power, you might ask? This is a little bit more tricky. Unlike max heart rate, your max power is a minimum average over a given time interval. For example, suppose you're sprinting for the finish line. The competition is fierce, and you're out of the saddle hustling for all you're worth. You cross the finish 30 seconds after you begin your sprint and then rest. Now, suppose you're looking at the power profile for this effort. You might discover that the first 5 seconds you're generating about 800 watts. During the next 5 seconds, you're generating 750 watts. And then after that, 700 watts, and so on. As you get tired, your power slowly tapers off. Finding your max power over 30 seconds is simply an average power output over that 30-second interval. This is a much more accurate means of finding your max than trying to find an instantaneous max power output. Your percentage of max is calculated by dividing your current power output by your max. Most power computers can automatically generate the percentage of max value for you. The dashboard has 3 graphs. These are a really cool way to find out where you're located along the timeline of the ride. The graphs are divided by a bar, showing you where you're located along them. The top graph displays a hill profile. The middle graph displays the effort profile, and the bottom displays the power profile. Keeping your eyes on these are a great way to identify changes as they approach. The moving map provides some nice information about where you're cycling. Roads, topography, landmarks, rivers, lakes, and more can be identified so you don't feel lost on the ride. Also note, north is always up. I'm done. Have a great workout.